This week we're talking about property lines. Now, a property line element in Revit is quite literally a boundary that you can draw around your building's property to define its legal extent. So the property line in Revit will represent the actual legal boundary of your piece of property. We're going to create such property lines in a floor plan view. So the tool is unique in the sense that while technically not a drafted element, it is a model element technically, but for whatever reason, Revit only displays property lines in floor plan views. So let's start with that notion first. I'll start by opening up a 3D view just to show you that it is not supported in 3D. So I'm just going to use the default 3D view here and then go to Massing and Site and notice that the property line icon here on the ribbon is grayed out. So you can't create a property line in a 3D view. Furthermore, if you have an existing property line, it won't display here in 3D. So it is not a 3D element. So that means we need to open a floor plan instead. Now, you could open up any one of your floor plans, but I think probably the most logical choice for a property line is the site plan. So I'm going to open up that site plan view and notice that the property line icon will now appear on the ribbon. So if we hover over that button, a tooltip will display and it will confirm for us what we've just witnessed on our own, that it creates a property line in a plan view. So that's the first thing you need to know about property line elements in Revit, is that for whatever reason, they only appear in plan views. And that's just something you need to be aware of. Now, that doesn't make them drafting lines. So there are other kinds of elements, drafting elements, where you draw them and they only display in the view that you create them in. But that's true of any view. So if you draw a drafting line in a plan view, it won't show in other plan views or in 3D or in elevations. But if you draw a drafting line in an elevation, the same would be true. It would display in that elevation and it wouldn't show in any other view. Well, that's not the case with property lines. Property lines are limited to plan views only. And within plan views, they behave like model elements. So let me demonstrate. Let's just do a really quick property line here. I'm going to click the tool, and it's going to give me two choices for how to create it. I can create it with distances and bearings or by sketching. So let's just do a simple by sketching here. And I'm just going to draw a property line over here to the right side of the building. And I'm just going to do a single segment there and click Finish. Now, when I do that, it will highlight the element in orange, and it will say here in this warning that it does not form a closed loop, and therefore the area will not be computed. Okay, well, that's fine. That tells us that we can actually have an open property line or a closed property line. But if you are interested in the area of your site, make sure you create a closed boundary, which we will do in a few moments. But meanwhile, this property line that I have right here, if I select it, you can see that on the properties palette, the area is in fact blank. So there is no area information. However, if we open another floor plan, like say the L2 architectural floor plan, you will see that that property line element is displaying here in this view. Now, I did the L2 architectural floor plan because if I open up the L1 architectural floor plan, it does not display here. So I didn't want you to get the wrong idea by opening up the L1 view. The only reason it is not displaying here is because it's hidden in Visibility Graphics. So let's talk about Visibility Graphics next. If you go to Visibility Graphics or type the keyboard shortcut of VG, you will see the standard Visibility Graphics window appear. And if you scroll down to the area where the elements beginning with the letter P occur, you will not see property line in the list here. So property line elements are not a category in themselves. They are actually a subcategory of something else. And that other category that they belong to is the site category. So that's sort of the next thing you need to know about property lines. They are a subcategory of site. Now, even though that subcategory is checked on here in the level 1 floor plan, because its parent category is turned off, then everything beneath that category is also turned off, including property lines. I could turn it back on here. I could click OK, and then that property line will now appear. So if you draw a property line, it will display in any floor plan whose visibility allows for it, but will not display anywhere else. It will not display in 3D or in elevations or in sections. It is a plan-only tool. So notice that even though I've drawn it in plan, if I go to 3D, it still does not display here. Okay, so let me close a few of these views, and I'm going to go back to my site plan. Let's delete this one, and let's talk about the two ways to create property lines. So if I go back to the Massing and Site tab, click on the property line tool, we'll get this message again where we can again create either by entering distances and bearings or by sketching. Now we did the last one by sketching. Let's do enter distances and bearings this time. And what I'm going to do is just type in a really simple set of distances here. So for the first distance, I'm going to put in maybe 20 feet. And it's going to go north 90 degrees. Then I'm going to click Insert, and let's do maybe 30 feet in this direction. And it's going to go 0 degrees north and then to the east. Let me do another insert here. Let's do 20 again. Let me put in -90, and as you can see, it'll say that negative numbers are not allowed. It wants something between 0 and 90. So if you want -90, what you do is you put in 90, and then you change east to west, and that will make it go in the other direction. And then finally, I will insert one more time and type in 30 again here, and then this time I could do south. Now, when I click OK, it will create basically a rectangle here, and you can see that it's going to let me place it on screen. So what's interesting about that table is you're not putting in absolute coordinates, rather you're just describing the shape by putting in, think of them as relative coordinates. So we went over 20 and then up 30, back 20 and then down 30, but that described a rectangle, but you could click and place this rectangle anywhere that you like. Now, at any time, you could select that existing property line and click Edit Table, and then come back in here and make modification. Now, another thing that we could have done while I was creating this, so let me just do another one here where I'll put in essentially the same values. So again, I'll go 20, then I'll go 30, then I'll go maybe this time I'll do 40 and come back west with that. But then I'm going to say add a line to close. So if you don't want to have to calculate what that distance and bearing should be on that final line, you could just click this button and you could see it calculates the distance and the bearing for me. And when I click OK, I now have this triangle shape instead of the rectangle shape. So if you have that information from, say, your civil engineer, you can fill it in directly in a table. Now, I'm going to delete both of these. And I think in most cases, architecturally anyway, what you're going to have is just some sort of a sketch that you're working from, a diagram, and sketching is going to be the nicer way to create this property line. So I'm going to go to property line, and this time I'm going to do create by sketching. And now you have your normal collection of sketch tools available to you. And what I'll do is just sort of start maybe over here, and I'm going to draw this kind of perpendicular and parallel to the building. Then I'm going to go along this way, parallel to the street, then maybe go up at an angle here, kind of over here, and then finally come back and close the shape like so. So let's say that that is the property line for my building here. Because I did a closed shape, it will calculate the area for me. So let's click Finish here. You can see the closed property line here. And then when we look over here on the Properties palette, you can see the area that's been calculated. So that's the basic mechanics of using the property line tool. Now, I want to point out one last thing about a sketch-based property line. You have two ways that you can edit it once it's been created. The first is to click Edit Sketch, and that just takes you back to the standard sketch mode. I should also point out here that if you create a second sketch, it will actually allow that. So a double loop, if you will, is permissible in a property line. So just something to be aware of. But standard sketch rules will apply. If you try to do something like that, then it will complain because it doesn't know what it's supposed to do with that, particularly when it comes to calculating the area. So even though it is possible to have more than one loop, they do have to be continuous integral loops and they can't overlap one another. So that is one way that you could edit your existing property line. The other is to use the edit table option. So if you click that, it will warn you that it's going to convert your sketch-based property line into a table-based property line, and there's no going back. So if I answer yes here, it will convert that sketch that I drew into distances and bearings. And now I could manipulate this using this interface by either inserting, deleting, moving lines up or down, changing any of the bearings, changing any of the distances. So you can make any modifications here that you wish, but you would be doing it all within this table now. You would not have the benefit of being able to do it with a sketch. So definitely something to consider. If you do need to convert it, it is possible, but just do so carefully because there is no going back again once you've made that conversion. Now I say that, but honestly, the simplest thing to do if you needed to go back again would be to sketch a new one and just simply trace over the existing one. So you certainly could recreate this sketch-based property line based on the one underneath. And you can see now that I have two of them here. This one is based on a table, and then this one is based on a sketch. So even though technically, yes, you can't convert it back to a sketch, there's nothing to prevent you from recreating it by tracing over the first. Now, the final thing that I will mention about this is, as far as what you see graphically, that's all going to happen in object styles and visibility graphics. So just remember that the property line is a subcategory of the site category. If you want to change it globally, you can go to Object Styles, scroll down and locate the site category, expand it, and property lines will be right here. And here's your line weight, and here's your dash pattern. Or you could do the same thing in visibility graphics on a view-by-view basis.